Hi Lana, welcome once again to Lana's Coach. So if you're a student, maybe an undergraduate student and of course a postgraduate student who needs to understand how to write a successful research proposal, then you should be in the right place. I own the right to present this particular information because I'm also a research student. I've done quite a number of research papers, of course, research proposals. And I think sharing this information with you will help you in one way or the other. So, ideally, the most important part of a research or a research paper is that you present a research proposal. So, getting it right in the proposal is actually as equal as maybe getting it right in your research, in your final research paper. So we are going to look at maybe various aspects of a research proposal. So I call upon you to maybe pick your pen and paper as we dive deep into the details. All right. Maybe we could start by looking at the various parts of a proposal, because there's no need of us talking about actually creating or rather coming up with the research proposal and we don't know what it entails, right? So ideally, the main purpose of a research proposal is to capture the evaluator's attention if you're a student, and of course demonstrate the study's potential benefits and prove that it's a logical and consistent approach that is based on the Vaughan 2010 research. And of course, to ensure that your research proposal contains these elements, there are several aspects to include in your proposal. So we are going to borrow heavily on maybe the research that was done by Al-Riyami, that is 2008, across our discussion. So a good research proposal should include a title, it should include an abstract, introduction, objectives, variables, research questions or hypotheses, and methodology. So we're going to take a lot of time maybe understanding all these elements one by one, because they're very, very critical. So we need to understand how we can write a good title, how we can come up with an abstract, and so on. So let's look at the first element of a research proposal, and that is a title, right? Now, at the beginning, this is what you need to have within your research proposal. A research proposal title should be concise and to the point, but informative. So the title of your proposal may be different from the title of your final research project. I always emphasize on this. It could be different or vary, but that is completely normal. So your findings may help you come up with a title that is more fitting for the final project. Remember, you can always be redefining or reviewing your title as you embark on maybe your results and so on, right? And then you can have your final title that actually links with all the parameters of your study. So therefore, what are the characteristics of a good proposal title as captured by Riyami, right? So the first characteristic is that a proposal title should be catchy. Catchy, it catches the reader's attention by speaking or by piquing their interest. It should also be positive. It spins your project in a positive way towards the reader. The title should also be transparent. It identifies the independence and dependent variables, right? It should capture the variables, right? But note that it is also common for proposal titles to be very similar to your research question or hypothesis or thesis statement, right? So those are things that we need to also understand. The other element of a research proposal is the abstract. How should your abstract be? Ideally, an abstract is a brief summary of not maybe more than 350 words or 300 thereabout of the study you are proposing. So according to Riyami, the various elements of an abstract should actually capture your primary research questions, should capture your hypothesis or main argument. Also the method you will use to complete the study. So this will include the research design, sample population, or measuring instruments that you plan to use. So that is a detailed abstract, and those are the key elements that it should contain. Now, those three parts, ideally the two parts actually are like the preamble, right? Then you need to look at the other crucial part, which is the introduction to your proposal, right? So the introduction, or rather the purpose of the introduction, is to give readers background information about your topic, right? So it gives the readers a basic understanding of your topic so that they can further understand the significance of your proposal. So maybe according to Riami, a good introduction will explain how it relates to other research done on the topic. So perhaps you could mention what are some of the work that has been done on this particular research previously. Also, it should explain why your research is significant to the field, right, or area of study, right? Also, it should provide some relevance of your study. So those are the elements of a good introduction. After you have had your introduction, then you should proceed to the objectives, right? So your research objectives are the desired outcomes that you will achieve from the research project. So depending on your research design, this may be generic or very specific. Now remember, objectives gives you the roadmap of how you are going to conduct your research. So every objective should actually be accompanied by ideally some research question or what answers these particular objectives. So what we say, you may also have more than one objective, right, that presents your case. Like for example, you can have general objectives, which are actually what the research project will accomplish, and of course you need to have specific objectives that relate to the project, to the research questions that the researcher aims to answer through the study. Now you should be very careful, and that's what I've captured here. Be careful not to have too many objectives in your proposal, as having many of these can make your project lose focus. Plus, it may not be possible to achieve several objectives in one study. What you need to know as a good researcher is that every objective that you state needs to be answered or need to be achieved. So have few objectives that at the end of the research we can always say that your objectives were met. And then also you need to capture the research questions, right? Research questions are very, very important. So this is the main piece of your research project, because it explains what your study will discover to the reader. It is the question that fuels the study, so it is important for it to be precise and unique. Again, you don't need to be, or you don't want to be too broad. So, and it should identify a relationship between two variables, either independent or not either, an independent and dependent, according to Riami. Ideally, research questions are very main, right? So we can focus on the 6 mainly used types of questions, research questions that can guide your study. You can use existent or existence questions. This refers to a phenomenon, concept, behavior, action, or condition, right? Like for example, do people get nervous before speaking in front of an audience? Yeah, so it's based on existent questions. You can also further use description and classification questions, which aims to find out how much a particular concept or phenomenon or condition applies to a specific population or group. Like I've given an example here. What are the study habits of college freshmen, or rather university freshmen, at the University of Nairobi? right? So that is a typical description or a classification question. We can go ahead and also look at other research questions. We have composition questions, right? Ask about some specific elements that make up a concept, behavior, action, or condition. So there's an example here. What primary traits create a successful romantic relationship, right? So that's an example of composition question. We can go ahead and also look at relationship questions. Asks whether there is a relationship or association between two concepts or objects. Like, for example, is there a relationship between a child's performance in school and their parents' social economic status, right? So we could have this kind of question. And of course, the other question that you can always use is descriptive or comparative questions. This asks whether one object or idea is different from another. So typically each group has a characteristic that distinguishes it from the other group, such as age or socioeconomic status. Like, for example, are high school seniors more motivated than high school freshmen? So that could be a descriptive or other comparative questions. The other one that I found very, very important question that we need to understand is causality questions. This asks whether one thing impacts or causes another thing. Like, for example, do news media outlets impact a person's political opinions? So those are some of the several research questions that you can always factor in. But I won't really conclude the research questions without talking about hypotheses and theories, because they are very fundamental. Ideally, hypotheses are different from theories in that theories represent general principles and sets of rules that explain different phenomena. They typically represent large areas of study because they are applicable to anything in a particular field. So a hypothesis focus on specific areas within a field and are educated guesses. We call them educated guesses, meaning that they have the potential to be proven wrong. Because of this, that's why hypotheses can also be formed from theories. So that is just a parting shot in terms of understanding hypotheses and theories. Lastly, when you're coming up with your research proposal, you need to factor in methodology. Now, methodology is a very important element within a research proposal. So you must thoroughly explain how you will conduct your study. That is methodology. So we are going to look at quite a number of things as captured by Al-Rayami on how you should present your methodology. So the first crucial aspect is the research design. Ask yourself, what research approach will your study take? Will it be quantitative or will it be qualitative? What are the research subjects or participants? Who will be participating in your study? Does your study require human participation? How will you determine who to study? Right? Ideally, you need to know your focus population, or rather your focus group of study. So that depends with the overall research objective. The sample size, right, also is very important. How many participants will your study require? If you're not using human participants, how much of the sample will you be studying? Of course, you need to have the correct sample size out of a population so that you get the right results, right? Then you need to ask yourself or consider the timeline, right? So this will offer a proposed list of the general tasks and events that you plan to complete the study. This will include a time frame for each task or event and the order in which they will be completed. So generally here you need to have some kind of project management skills. So you can have some software that is going to help you break down all these tasks against the time that they're going to take. So we can still proceed with the methodology because this is a very broad area. We also need to talk about the setting. Where will you be conducting the study, right? Where? Is it within the country where you are doing your studies, or you are going to go where? So that should be captured. What are the study instruments? What measuring tools or computer software will you be using to collect data, right? Or how will you collect the data? Are you going to use survey? You're going to use questionnaires, Google Forms, all those, right? So you need to know what instruments you're going to use. How will you analyze the data? Again, this is a very critical aspect. What strategies or tools will you use to analyze data? Are you going to use Stata software, for example, IBM SPSS softwares? Which one are you going to use to analyze your data? And of course, quality control. Will you have precautions in place to ensure that the study is conducted consistently and that outside factors will not skew the data? Very, very important to consider. Of course, budget, right? What type of funding will you need for your study? This will include the funds needed to afford measuring tools, software, maybe transport from one point to the other, right? How will you share the study's findings? What will you plan to do with the findings, right? Of course, you have done the research, you have found the findings. What next, right? How will you share the study findings? And of course, you also need to factor in the significance of the study. How will your study impact or expand on existing knowledge of the subject area? So again, we can also talk about interventions. If you plan on using anything on human participants for the study, you must include information, right? This especially is important if you plan on using any substances on human subjects. So I hope you understand what these are. Also factor in you need to factor in the ethical issues, right? Are there any potential ethical issues surrounding your study? And of course, lastly, you can also have potential limitation. Are there any limitations that could skew the data and findings from your study? And then lastly, appendix, right? So if you need to present any consent forms, interview questions, surveys, questionnaires, or any other items that will be used in your study, you should include samples of each item with an appendix to reference them. If you are using a copyrighted document, you may need written permission from the original creator to use it in your study. So a copy of the written permission should be included in your proposal. So ideally, ladies and gentlemen, learners, those are the key elements that you need to put into consideration when you are coming up with your research proposal. So step by step, you need to build on those particular elements. And in the previous discussions, I've also mentioned how you can use the artificial intelligence to generate or come up with, to help you come up with your research proposal. So you can have a look at what we discussed in our previous videos. If you like the information from this particular video, you can give it a like and of course be part of this community. All right, thanks.